And we're live. Welcome everyone to episode 146 of The Glow. So glad to be with you in Asheville, North Carolina. My name is Brian Piergrossi, author of The Big Glow and The Wow and the Now, life coach, retreat facilitator, vlogger, blogger, podcaster. These are things that didn't even exist like 10 years ago or so, probably.
You're a modern human.
I'm a modern human. And this is Aaron. You know what? I don't know how to say your last name.
I say it Maret.
That's what I say. Okay.
If we were in France, we'd say Maret.
I know. I was thinking last name. Like maybe it's a French name.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's French Aaron Maret.
Mm-hmm.
Like Stephen Colbert. Yeah. Anyway, Aaron's with us. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello.
And we're here together, obviously. So that's fun. That's kind of a new thing. And Annie's behind the camera. You can say like hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. She's a little shy, but you might hear her voice sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll be checking out like who's coming on so when you're entering, this is one of the right times where I won't be able to see the comments.
Yep,
but Annie will be monitoring the comments.
Liz Cox is here.
Hi, Liz Cox.
Jane.
Oh, Liz.
Hi, Jane. And you can share where you're from. I always like that. I always enjoy that. There's like a heart button you can hit when you're really enjoying something. There's a wow button when something's like really wow. I think there's even like, isn't there like a sad button?
There's a sad button.
Yeah, if you say something that really like is a tearjerker, which probably won't happen but could. You know, there's all kinds of options to express yourself.
Donna Brooks.
Yeah.
Danielle Herring.
Yeah. We embrace like all the aspects. We embrace all the aspects of oneself here. Loving what is. Which brings me to your morning. So you had a little bit of a challenging morning, right?
Particularly so.
Yeah. So it's just interesting, like it feels like I was filling into this, talking to you briefly on the phone. It's like the sense of like we have an idea of the way the morning's supposed to go, right? And it's not going that way. And then we're kind of like pushing against that and it kind of creates this resistance and it amplifies. I mean, I can relate to that. I don't know if does that relate to like what you were experiencing, or is it?
I mean, I just think I was taking life very seriously.
Yeah.
Which I tend to do in my professional life.
Yeah.
As a design build contractor.
Yeah.
When I'm responsible for budgets and timelines and crews and material, it just, I like to be impeccable.
Yeah. And
sometimes things are out of my control and I feel like it's my fault and I start believing my thoughts, a lot of stressful thoughts. And today gave me a lot of practice with that. This morning gave me a lot of practice with that. So one of the things I was noticing is that I sometimes don't metabolize stress very well when I'm in that space. Like I can flip. It's interesting, like culturally when I'm like with you, or if I'm in spaces where like that's really supported, like that's the sort of like that's what's going on. Yeah, I can really meet that. Yeah, but in sort of the professional life where I'm got my work hat on, sometimes it's harder for me to metabolize stress, and it was just like, but it was also really noticeable. Like there were so many things stacked up that didn't go well today. It was just like, what's going on there? So I'm really, at some level, I can see that I'm wanting to practice more with that, wanting to like become more aware of this dynamic and maybe find more balance.
It feels like that's such an important, why community is so valuable. You know, to have people that can support you, people that can be there for you, people that can listen, people that know you well enough to lend some perspective. I mean, to put it in really simple terms, people that love you, right? So like, that's something that you and I have talked a lot about, is the value of community and projects that we're working on creating together, bringing community to a culture that's really to such a large degree lost community. You know, we're so focused on individuality, which certainly has its place, but to the extent that I think one of the greatest diseases that people suffer from, I think the number one disease people suffer from in this country, which creates other diseases, is loneliness. You know, people are incredibly lonely. So what do you find as far as the value of community? Is that something like a valuable thing that's where we want to go, you know, culturally, globally?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, actually I was thinking about you this morning, and I was thinking about the that little piece you shared from your brother, wasn't it? And like, what are the key elements that actually create real community? And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the element of kind of shared risk or shared responsibility or shared struggle. And because I was feeling alone this morning, and sort of like the, what I was holding and what I was both emotionally, but also just the sort of tangible material aspects. And I've personally been really desiring more teamwork, more like sort of sharing responsibility, sharing risk, sharing, those sorts of things. And I think there's something very powerful there when people are like, sort of struggling together for something, but in a kind of life-affirming way, trying, striving, I guess. There's something very powerful, and that's something that I've experienced a lot of times in my life in a really satisfying way. And there's a big arena in my life where I would love more of that. And I feel like that's something I'm really excited to continue to explore how to create more of.
Yeah, I think there's something really sweet about kind of just hanging out with people that you enjoy, that you appreciate, that you love. And there's this kind of extra element where you bring in a shared purpose together. Yeah. And I think, you and I talked about recently that, and if the purpose is challenging, it actually can be even more of a higher fulfillment. Yeah. Right? Or it can like tear the group apart. So there's a little bit of a higher risk factor, but there's something with the feeling of like, we have a purpose, and it's a big purpose, and it feels like it's for the benefit of something greater than ourselves. And through this shared sense of purpose and the challenges that we face, we're learning and growing and evolving together. Like that feels like that's like, that's what it's all about. When you can have all those components, together as one.
Yeah. I have a little anecdote to share.
Yeah, please.
It's a really memorable, really tangible experience of the power of kind of striving together. Yeah. So in 2004, I was living in San Francisco, and I was involved in a group of folks who came together to start a community warehouse space. There was also like an event space. It's like an anarchist scene. And we got this warehouse, we rented this commercial space in the Mission District of San Francisco. And it was completely raw. Like, in fact, it was under construction when we moved into it. Like, it was a construction zone. And so we all camped out in this construction zone together. And then over the course of, it's like 6 months or so, while we're all like sleeping in the same room and sleeping bags on the floor, we built out, we built the walls, we built the, we put the sheetrock, put in doors, we built out the rooms that we were all going to live in. And there was this sense of, it was so palpable and tangible, the sense of like, it was super joyful. The experience of being in that, it was a kind of a challenging, materially challenging situation, but everybody, the vibe was super high and everyone felt really on purpose. And then it was really distinct. Like after it was all done, the construction was done, we all moved into our rooms, and then all of a sudden like something like was gone. Like we had this like shared struggle, and then as soon as we got to the easy part, where we're all like, sleeping in mattresses in our own rooms. It was relaxing to have that ease, but it was also like, wait, where'd that thing go that we were doing together? Where'd that struggle go? Where'd that striving go? Yeah. And we kind of commented on it. We were like, we were kind of processing that real time. Yeah. It was just like, wow, there's something really powerful and life-serving when we're in a struggle together. Yeah. Yeah. And I really remember that. It really like teaches me a lot to think about that.
Yeah, it's really good to like keep that broader view in mind. Like I remember you reminded the story of Sylvester Stallone, and he was just this guy with his dream of making this movie, Rocky. Wrote the script himself, directed it himself, started it himself, and he was talking about how like when he was really struggling to make this movie, and people were turning him down, and he was he's making little bits of progress, and this is happening, but then there's a setback. He's like, that was the best time of my life. Actually, when I look back, there was something about, because he had something that he knew, all those elements were there. He had something he knew was going to make a difference for people, make a positive difference, and he felt this real sense of like this calling in his heart to like get it out, And he didn't have much money. He's like sleeping in rough spaces, but there was this great joy in this progress of bringing this project that he really believed in into being. You know, so I think that just, you know, something that we've all heard before, but just remembering that it's the journey, you know, the journey and enjoying the journey. It's not like, oh, when we get to this destination, then that's when the good thing happens. You know?
Right.
The good thing is now. You know, the good thing is in the struggle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the purpose specifically, I do feel like people are really lonely in our world today. And I also think people are really deeply, you know, hungry for more purpose, for more of a sense of that they're doing something that's contributing to something larger than themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that in this modern, you know, culture and civilization, there is so much ease and comfort, you know, through modern amenities and stuff.
Yeah.
And we've been striving for that. We've been building for that for thousands of years to have this moment of like, wow, we've got so much, you know, of our needs met. And there's some interesting sort of like other side of that coin, which is like people are so comfortable that I think people tend to think that they want to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's something deeper that people aren't even necessarily aware of. That like when I feel most alive, and I think when I've seen other people feel most alive, like they're fulfilling something that's contributing to something greater than themselves and greater than just being comfortable. And I think that's really a common experience right now. Yeah,
you bring two things into my consciousness. One is, for so much of us in America, you know, it's sort of sad. I've been for certain reasons, I've been watching a little more TV lately. Not much, but a little bit more than zero, which I was before. So I see commercials, you know, and these commercials are like, you know, use this toothpaste, and you know, this. It's like the goal is get this shampoo, get this, all these. So it's like this consumer energy, and like there's something in us who just knows that that's not the end all be all. But in America, it's like more and more. It's about like your purpose is to consume things, to get these products, you know. And if you consume these and get these products, then you're living the American dream. You're living the life that's the happiest life. But something in us like just knows that that's not true. Mm-hmm. And there's something much deeper, this shared sense of purpose, that is why we're here. And tuning into that, tapping into that, and then the comfortability thing. Yeah, comfortability and happiness and fulfillment, they're different things. And just to differentiate that, comfortable is almost like there's a point where it can almost become a sense of like a deadening quality, you know, where a certain level of uncomfortability, particularly psychologically, emotionally, like being a bit out of your comfort zone, mm-hmm. right? That's where you're expanding, that's where you're growing, that's where you're evolving, and that's what we're here for, you know? So that's where we feel the most alive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So your journey, how did you... were you always contemplating life in a deeper way? Or was that something that was from birth that you feel like you were always thinking at a young age, or was there a point where you sort of deepened?
You know, I think what I notice about when I reflect on my lifetime is that I've always just been really curious naturally.
Yeah.
I've always just wondered about things, and certainly that goes as far back as I can remember into childhood. Mm-hmm. And then as I began learning about the world, I had this really strong drive to, I wanted to connect what I already knew to the next larger container, what I call schema. You know, it's called schema and, you know, pedagogical, you know, when you're teaching people something, it's like, what are they, with that new information, what structure does it hang on? You know, what's the context within which it fits? And so I was always striving for like a larger and larger schema. Like, what's that? Okay, what's that connect to? Like, and how does that connect? Kind of on all fronts in terms of like, you know, all the different inquiries that I've been involved in.
So you're seeing how things connect to other things. What would you say was like the catalyst for like the spiritual element, the sense of how would you define spiritual? Actually, that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, for me, I really see that my kind of like spirituality and my focus on spiritual principles mm-hmm. and spiritual ideas, mm-hmm. metaphysics, evolved out of kind of my own personal awakening process that was born from like just learning about my emotions. Mm-hmm. So spirituality for me was like just a natural outgrowth of just becoming aware of like, oh, I'm an emotional being mm-hmm. and I have all this inner landscape and there's these energies that move in me mm-hmm. and I didn't have the kind of upbringing where I had a lot of support in knowing what those were and how to give language to them and how to really feel secure and feel like I knew myself and I knew it was moving in me. And so when I left home and went to college and was off my own, I had the opportunity to meet a few really key people who were, became really dear friends and really close, who helped me in that process and helped me become aware of my emotions. And so then I would I would read books, and I would just sort of follow the thread of what, how do I know more about myself? How do I know more about my emotionality? How do I heal a lot of the trauma and woundedness that I was holding from earlier in my life? And that process of trying to become aware of my emotions slowly led into ideas about spirituality and ideas about, these invisible dimensions of self that aren't the body and aren't even emotions. There's, what are we made of? Where do we come from? Some of these deeper questions. All that kind of was born out of, kind of an emotional quest.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us back to what we were talking about before, where I find for most people, myself included, it's difficulty or challenge or being uncomfortable that makes us look deeper into ourselves. That's who we really are and what life really is. So I think it's really important. So again, when you're in that space for people to recognize that there's an opportunity to grow and to evolve, and that there's a benefit there ultimately, even if it's difficult in the moment. There's benefit in going deeper into ourselves. And so you started exploring different. Where'd you go to college?
I did undergrad at Maryland, University of Maryland, College Park, School of Architecture.
The Terrapins.
That's right, you got it. And then I went to grad school out in California, the Bay Area, San Francisco at UC Berkeley. And that choice to move to the Bay Area was very much driven by this magnetism of culture. I could feel that the culture there was all these people who were looking into these ideas that I was just kind of getting started on.
Yeah. Interesting your take on this. I had a similar journey. I left college, went to Penn State University, so we're both from the East Coast, and I went to Northern California. A little different route, but I ended up, as much as I could, not maybe as much as I could, but spending a lot of time in Berkeley, in the Bay Area. And that was such an important chapter in my life. It just blew me open. It's oh my God, really? Yes. This is a real thing out here? Telegraph Avenue, walking around, they have that market thing. It's a Saturday or Sunday. And just the diversity of characters and just the uniqueness of the ability to express yourself in a unique way was really liberating for me. And then there was kind of a point where it was sort of stopped. It was you could express yourself uniquely in individuality, and people were moving from all different places, and they were going to all different places. So it was kind of a transient environment, it felt like. And so when it came for this longing for community, it felt like it really wasn't happening. It was more based on individuality there. And that's what eventually brought me to Asheville, is that Asheville felt like a place that valued community. So did you find a similar, it sounds like you had some interesting projects that were happening there for you.
We definitely.
But what brought you to Asheville?
Well, I would say there's a similarity between our journeys. There was a practical matter that I knew that I wanted to be involved in, kind of moving on from the urban warehouse community project. I knew I was feeling called for more of a land-based, earth-based project of community, and land prices in San Francisco, Bay Area.
That's a limit.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, it was kind of pragmatic, but for my partner, BJ, I think she would have more of the analysis that kind of keys into what you're saying, which is it was just, there's very shallow roots because people are coming and going a lot. And she was from Mississippi, and where you're from, who your family is, the roots in Mississippi are just super deep. Yeah. And that level of connectivity and the pace was something I think that was just not, she was ready for something a little slower and a little more rootsy. Yeah. And so Asheville, I mean, it has that. It has a little bit of both, because I think what is shared about my experience of being in the Bay Area and being in Asheville, they both share this sort of evolutionary quality. Culturally, there's this support for forward thinking, for artistic expression, for exploring the edges of human potential and possibility. But here in Asheville, because of the place and because of the culture, the Appalachian culture, there's just more roots, and it's it's kind of couched in a different context, which makes it really, really, really interesting and wonderful.
Yeah. So when you started delving in more spiritually, what were some of the things that inspired you? Some books or some teachers or teachings?
Well, in looking back, it just seems so obvious, but this notion of reincarnation was key for me in awakening to the mystery, we'll call it, or something that's, that you can't scientifically prove. But I was reading some books about, there were some therapists who were kind of like stumbling their way into like past life regressions and stuff, and like realizing that like there's a such thing as a past life, and realizing that like, the souls come into incarnations time and time again, and this whole idea of reincarnation. And it was really like, it just really struck a chord in me, and it really kind of woke up it almost like pushed a button to open up a whole new avenue of inquiry around spirituality. So that was like the first thing, was this idea of reincarnation. And then a few years later, reading, I think it was reading Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now, and just this whole concept that I'm not my thoughts, and like just the capacity to conceive of that I can separate like my essence and who I am and what I am from like the content that runs all the time. And that like awareness of that possibility was very significant for me.
I had an interesting journey with that book. I got that book, I bought it, I heard a lot of good things about it, and I started reading it. It's just kind of boring. I wasn't that into it, So I was like, no, just not really feeling it. Some other books seem more I was an avid reader at the time too. Other books seem more inspiring or interesting or exciting. And then so I put it on the shelf, and it just sat there for years, probably 3 years, 4 years. And then there was a moment where I was going through a real challenge in the relationship realm, going through a difficulty in the relationship realm, and kind of just asking questions. And I would walk by the shelf, and it was almost like there was like a light just shining on that book. All the other books were like dark.
Read me.
I don't know if I can relate to this kind of experience, but I've had this like a few times with different things. It's like this light shining on this book. So walk by 4 or 5 times over the span of like some days, and it's like, okay, let me pull this book down and take a look at it. So I open it. I take the book. I open it up, and in big letters I see Enlightened Relationships. That was the chapter of the book that I opened to. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I'm trying to understand and work out. So I start reading, and like every sentence is exactly what I'm looking for. It's so fascinating. Where before it's the same book, but it didn't have resonance for me, and now the same book is like exactly what I'm needing, what I'm wanting. So I read that chapter. I read it to the end of the book, and I start at the beginning, and I read the whole book again. And I read the whole book again. I read it 4 or 5 times in a row, just nonstop.
Wow!
And it was like such a huge opening. It was what I would say. It was like I sort of like when he even says this in the beginning. It's like I can't tell you anything you don't already know, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this confirmations of like, oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But somehow that confirmation is really important for us to kind of affirm what is the truth inside ourselves. So yeah, that was a huge opening for me too, and I know a lot of other people that are tuning into to us here. And then 2 other things I know that there could be other things I'm sure as well, but 2 things that I know that were inspiring for you. One is you teach a weekly, or you would say teach, how would you say it?
I facilitate a study group.
A weekly study group on the Law of One. So tell us about how that inspired you.
Yeah, well, okay, so just fit. How does it fit? Okay, now I have a sense of this, and how does that fit? And I was always kind of like, that just continued. And then as soon as I found the Law of One, which is basically like, it's primarily about soul evolution and cosmic plan. Yeah. So at this high level, like how does creation, what's the pattern, what's the fundamental pattern of that? Yeah. And it kind of gave me this sort of like final like, whoa. And I just like that quest to find the broader schema, like relaxed, because like everything I'd ever learned about all felt relevant, it all fit, but it all finally like sort of had a container large enough to all make sense and all come together. So there was a synthesis that happened when I read that, the series of books. It's 5 books. So from that level of like my curiosity about the universe, curiosity about spirituality and all that stuff, that all found a lot of satisfaction in reading that book. And then just resonance, just the sort of straight up like, whoa, this feels really important, this feels true. Like I'd be reading the books and I would just like, in my mind as I'm reading, I would just like have these, I call them tendrils. I'd have these sort of visions of the future of like, I'm going to be teaching this, or I'm going to be helping people, you know, find this, I'm going to be translating this, I'm going to be, it felt really important. It felt like a part of my soul's mission was to help people who were on a similar, you know, kind of spiritual journey or a quest to understand, you know, sort of seekers of truth, to find this resource, which I find to be one of the most valuable resources that I know of.
And in the Law of One, they talk about different dimensions, right?
Well, they're called densities.
Densities.
Yep. In the Law of One, just to sort of distinguish between dimensions, because dimensions have a lot of different uses, and there's some ambiguity about that, and densities has a very sort of scientific specific terminology. So there's a reason why densities, but yes, there's these densities.
Can you take us to the densities quickly, like what they are?
Let's just jump right into the densities.
Jump right in. First density, second, 7, yeah?
7 densities.
Yeah.
So, so the creation is essentially can be described as an octave of light. So it's very easy to conceptualize this. You just think about how the white light from the sun goes through a prism and splits into the rainbow, and you can see those colors. So that similar sort of nesting of these densities, which essentially are, they're kind of phases of consciousness. And so what's going on at a high level, what's going on is there's this one infinite being, we call it God, in the raw material, the Law of One, it's called the one infinite creator. It's this unmanifest infinite being with infinite power and infinite capacity, and it manifests the universe. And the prime unit of manifestation are galaxies. And so each galaxy basically is a being called a logos. And a logos kind of has its own sense of self at a very high level. And it explores themes in that galactic experience, from birthing the galaxy all the way through the evolution of the galaxy and the suns in that galaxy and the planets in that galaxy, all the way until it resolves into a black hole, or whatever happens at the galactic level. And so that whole process, the galactic journey, takes place in these sort of 7 stages of consciousness. And each stage is sort of like an opportunity, a sort of field of potential for consciousness, the sort of raw material of consciousness, awareness, to explore different aspects of creation. And so, for example, Earth, at this point, is transitioning from the 3rd density to the 4th density. And each of these 2 eras, in each of these 2 densities, have like dramatically different purposes in terms of the evolution of the souls and the evolution of consciousness.
So let's focus on since we're transitioning from the 3rd to the 4th, let's focus on that. What's the 3rd density like, and what's the 4th density like? And I'll even throw a second question in, which is a big one. What's the 3rd, what's the 4th, and how do we get from the 3rd to the 4th?
Yeah, well, I'll quickly cover 1 and 2, just to sort of get us where we are now. So 1 is sort of the elements. It's sort of sort of material, literally the chemical elements, until biological, what we know of biological life can form. So early biological life is early 2nd density. So 2nd density is like, plants and animals, biological life. Before self-awareness, before there's a sort of I, there's a sort of individualized sense of self. So early, sense of I, that's early 3rd density. And so the whole journey through 3rd density basically is that each unit of consciousness, each person, is clarifying their metaphysical polarity. What that means is like positive path, negative path. It's basically good and evil. It's what we tend to think of as good and evil. And what's interesting about the Law of One, what's unique about the Law of One, is that it offers this framework for understanding good and evil. Like, how is it that the universe is purposeful and essentially good and benevolent, and yet there's what we see as good and bad, or good and evil expressing in the world? Well, they're both purposeful in so much as they're required to they kind of create this engine of novelty and awareness. It's like when somebody who's interested in the positive path and someone who's interested in the negative path meet, there's tension, and that tension is a kind of a creative tension, and it creates so much of what we see on planet Earth right now in terms of the diversity of experience that humans are having. And so the whole third density is about clarifying. Lifetime after lifetime, we come in and we have all these experiences and we clarify. Are we more interested at the core level? Are we more interested in serving others and serving unity and serving love and like finding out how we're all one thing? Are we more interested in control and power over and sort of this individualized sense of self and, serving the self, service to self? And once a person gains enough clarity, when polarizes sufficiently, then they're able to graduate from third to fourth density and have an experience of clarifying that choice throughout third or fourth, fifth, and sometimes into mid sixth density.
So really purifying your intention, clarifying your intention toward unity, essentially. Realization of unity, what do I call it? Unified field. The unified resonant field.
Yeah.
Obviously there's all kinds of different words for it, but the sense of, I guess, the way, there's kind of a through line of all spiritual teachings that I'm aware of a realization of oneness.
Right.
Realization of, I thought it was a separate thing, and now there's this realization that I'm not a separate thing, that I'm a part of everything, or that I am everything. And then there's a movement to realize that in the world of form, right? So it feels like that's moving from the third density to the fourth.
Well, in some ways, I mean, so unity consciousness really gets established in sixth density in terms of, in terms of the sort of the fundamental quality of the density. Yeah. Unity consciousness becomes fully apparent and fully established for all the beings in that density in sixth density. So we're striving towards that. Yeah. But fourth density is about lessons of love. And so on the positive path, a fourth density experience, like let's say on a fourth density positive planet, the entire planetary civilization would be practicing serving each other, serving love. And on a negative planet, it would be about loving the self to the exclusion of all others, and it's sort of a power struggle. But it's lessons of love. And then fifth density is the lessons of wisdom, which have to do with sort of the nature of light, the nature of the sort of fundamental nature of the laws of the universe. And then sixth is balancing those two. And the perfect balancing of love and wisdom automatically creates an understanding of oneness, an understanding of unity. Yeah.
And seven is like...
And seven basically is turning from having our eyes out into the manifest creation. Seven, it's like turning back towards the creator and becoming forever, becoming infinity, becoming the creator once again, and sort of releasing any vestiges of individualized sense of self.
Yeah. And you and BJ both have also been inspired by the work of Byron Katie.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So I was curious to ask you, how do those two fit together for you, Law of One teachings and Byron Katie's work?
Yeah.
How do you feel? How does that work for you?
Well, so just kind of like getting us back to our current, place in time. So each one of us, in our lifetime, we have the opportunity to become more true to who we are. We can you can kind of imagine it as like, I guess the way that the Law of One would say it is resolving distortions. So distortions are any beliefs that we're holding that aren't consummate with the truth of the universe, of unity, and sort of the Law of One. And so through the course of life experience, anytime where we have a felt sense of suffering or struggling, or we're having stressful negative emotions, it's kind of like an alarm clock. It's kind of like, hey, that's distortion. There's something that's not true that's being held in your consciousness, being held in your belief system. And so the work of Byron Katie essentially is this incredibly simple, incredibly approachable, and accessible system to just, when you notice that there's something, when your alarm clock's going off and you're having this experience of suffering, you can do something with that. You go into inquiry, you find out what thoughts are active for me right now, what am I believing? And then you just bring that belief through a process, and you're meeting it with a deeper level of compassion, a deeper level of awareness to see if it's true for you. And that's how we sort of shed distortion, and that's how we become more true to ourselves. That's how the light that moves through us, that is the creator, becomes more bright. When we remove these pieces that are false, when we remove these distortions, we remove these false beliefs from our consciousness, we become more of who we are. And the work of Byron Katie is just this really amazing tool because it's so simple. because it's so clear, because it's so accessible. I really appreciate that about it.
One of the things that's really fascinating for me about time is how to have simultaneous awareness of linear time and no time, or the timeless. So there's a sense of progression of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, January, February, March, right? The years.
Yeah.
And we're evolving through that time, or devolving through that time. And then there's this timeless, formless essence that's, I don't necessarily like to use the word perfect, because you can bring up different ideas of opposition to imperfect, but something that is of absolute love now. So I find this amazing paradox of like, we're moving through time to bring more love into the world of form, and at the same time, there is this place where there's absolute love always right now. And like, it's like dancing in the two of those things without, it's like they're both, I guess, beautiful, you know?
Yeah.
Does that resonate?
Yeah.
For you?
Well, not just beautiful, but also purposeful.
Yeah.
Like, did you watch Lucy?
Lucy, yeah, Lucy? A long time ago.
Well, there's a really wonderful kind of metaphor of time, and like, and she sort of explains, she gets time at the end. Yeah. She explains it. It's like, so if what's true is infinite, and everything is contained within it. Yeah. And it's all there.
And it's all now.
Yeah. There's, I think, and again, this is like deep metaphysical waters, but that's like, if it's all now, how could it be experienced? Like, time gives us the ability to stretch it out. Yeah. Stretch the infinity out. So we can zoom in on these particular experiences, these particular qualities. Yeah. And it allows the creator to enjoy itself with more fullness. And that's the purposefulness of time. It's the purposefulness of space. It's the purposefulness of the illusion. Yeah. Or what's called the illusion. I don't really like calling it illusion, because it's sort of like, has a negative it's kind of derogatory to it. It's amazing, but you know, the mystics call it that it's illusory. You know, the creation that we're in is illusory. It's not what we think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Filmmaking is really fascinating. How are we doing with time? Okay, good. We have one more time. Anyone saying any interesting comments or questions? Feel free to share. Meanwhile, filmmaking is really interesting, because filmmaking is actually creating the illusion of time. You know, it's really fascinating, because like, when I was in college, I did some stuff with film, and we're kind of getting inspired to get back into it again a little bit more. But it's like, okay, we're going to shoot this now, but this will go in the beginning here, we'll edit this in and put that in, we'll shoot that next week, but that'll come out, you know, it's like, you're creating the illusion of time, you know, consciously. And I think the more that we wake up, the more we're going to be able to consciously play with time. Like, I think we've been, for the most part as human beings, feel like we're like a slave to time. You know, this is this thing that's like, you know, we don't have any, what's the word, empowerment with, you know?
Well, we don't have control over. Time marches on. And we can't put reverse.
Yeah. It's doing things to us. But I think that as we wake up to recognize the essence of ourselves, which transcends time, then we can start to play with time and have fun with time and move time around and play. Like, I think that as we evolve in our consciousness, you know, there's stories of, now the word avatar is a different meaning, but avatar meaning someone that comes into is there maybe a different word for this in Law of One, or maybe it's but these beings that will come into a certain time-space reality and fulfill a certain mission and pop out and pop in another one, and right? So I think that as we wake up to the illusion of time, we can actually play with time more freely and kind of jump in and out of different timelines and become different characters. And, you know, this is where I'm fascinated by things like virtual reality. All these things are like, there's these kind of inroads that are pushing at all the same truth of like time being a construction of consciousness. Your thoughts? That was a lot, I know, but just the play of time, like, are you seeing the sense of like, as we awaken, as we move up into densities, the ability to move through time and have more empowerment with time?
Yeah, Yeah, that's. I mean, and I can only speak from what I've studied. I don't really have a whole lot of direct experience with transcending time.
Personally. Yeah, no, but what's interesting though is studying something, and if you study something and it rings true for you, that was an interesting question I used to have earlier. I was like, how do I know this is true? There's no real way to know because everyone's telling you something. How do I know what they're saying is true, right? Yeah. There must be something in me that recognizes truth. Yeah. When I'm in some kind of a clear place inside myself.
Well, we've come to call that resonance, right? Like there's this way that we're kind of using. The term gets used more and more. Yeah. But it's the simple idea is that when you pluck a string on a stringed instrument, if there's a if there's a harmonic, if there's another string that is tuned harmonically to that one that you just plucked, it'll start humming too. That's resonance. And there's sort of a metaphor, an analog that's within us. It's like if there's an idea or a thought form that feels true, that resonates for us, we're connected to it. There's some part of us that's expressing as true. Just like when we have stressful thoughts, we can inquire and be like, discover maybe that's not actually our deepest truth. Yeah. And there's these other places it's like resonance is sort of the opposite. It's like, it's like wow, it's the opposite of the stressful thought. It's like it's an exciting thought. It's like I want to know more about that. I want to dig into that one.
Right. So when you're reading something about moving to different timelines, there's something in you that resonates as truth. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and specifically, that's one kind of quality of creation. So, like I would say that like it wasn't necessarily that one idea of being able to like transcend time like really resonated for me, but in the context of learning about this larger map, that we're here, and we tend to forget, like we get really caught up in, or I do get really caught up in like this is it, like we're at the pinnacle of creation. It's like no, we're actually in this like billions and billions of year long journey, and we're in this like tiny little, but it just helps me take it less seriously. Yeah. And so in that larger context, time is just one element, and I'm just like, okay, that seems. I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna. Basically, I don't like believe the law of one is like my new truth. I don't try to take it on as my belief system and like that's my new dogma. Instead, I sort of like play with it as like my working. It's like this working model that I can use to test other things against and like test within myself, and I kind of enjoy holding it that way.
Yeah, I remember when I was early in my journey and I was with these guys, actually, really into Krishnamurti, and I was in Hawaii in an intentional community of Krishnamurti people. It's kind of funny, but there's a phrase that the guy said. The guy that him and his brother founded the community, and he would say, we're babies in this thing. Remember that phrase? He said, we're babies in this thing, Yeah, it's good to keep that perspective when you think of like, we're the human beings are the highest evolved on the planet, all this, these it's like, we're babies in this thing. We're just at the very, there's so much infinite potential where we can go. Yeah. Which is exciting.
Well, it's sweet, too. It's like we're babies in this thing. Yeah. How do we treat babies? We're very kind to them. That's true. We nourish them. We give everything we can to help them be well. Yeah. And it's nice to think about giving that to ourselves. It's like when we're babies at it, we don't have to be the ones who know. We don't have to be the ones who have it all figured out. We can just, be a little more gentle with ourselves, which I think is good medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as moving from 3D to 4D, putting the intention toward love, putting the intention toward kindness, compassion, like these are things that I think are kind of most people would agree with. But what is, as far as like practical things, like what do you see as like, how does that express itself practically in like moving from 3D to 4D?
I think the most, like the core of it is know yourself, like know what your truth is, know who you are. Because I think it's almost like a trap to just be like, okay, well, if you just are good to other people and you just do these things to sort of express these positive qualities, then that'll get you where you want to go. But that's a little bit backwards. Really what it is like, well, is that actually what you want? Find out. Like find out who you are. Find out what like really brings you alive. Find out what is the truest, like highest principle that really moves you, and serve that. And then give that to the world as your gift, as your unique, what is your unique song, your unique expression.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. So what is that for you right now?
Oh boy, Brian, you didn't tell me you're going to answer that question. Well, I think you personally...
Just what makes you feel more alive? What makes you feel most alive? Like, you know, the things that you just said.
Yeah.
Inspiring you and feels true for yourself.
Well, I'm really enjoying... I mean, one of the highlights of my life right now is the study group. So once a week we get together and we study the Law of One. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's so satisfying is because, I mean, my whole life I've experienced, like, there's more to... I know there's more to it. Like, I just have this hunch. There's more to it than what the sort of standard, you know, story of our culture and our history. Like, I knew there was more to it. And, you know, I get together with a bunch of people who all have that same sort of sense, and we get to explore what else is there to it, and what else, you know, what else is going on, and what else, sort of the larger picture. It's just really, it does something really deep for me. And so one of the things I'm trying to do and source is like creating more containers for that, creating more contexts that we can come together and explore the mystery together, and kind of like get outside of the mundane aspects of reality and get to engage in some of the more philosophical and metaphysical questions, and I really enjoy that stuff a lot.
There was a line, we were at the Ecstatic Dance on Saturday, and someone said, everything is sacred. And then Michael said, yes, and everything is mundane. You know, emptiness is form and form is emptiness. The sacred is mundane. So when you can like really get in that space where like, you know, just walking down the street is sacred, that's when you know you're in a good place. How we doing, love? You want to say anything?
We have a question from Tracy Gregg.
Oh, great.
Regarding time. Is time a mental construct?
Is time a mental construct, Aaron?
Well, one of the things that I'm finding useful in my inquiries into these questions, these philosophical questions, is this metaphor that really everything is mental. Like, we're kind of in the mind of God. Like, we get really convinced that we're in a material reality, but I've had some personal experiences into kind of like having the line between what I experience as the material reality, things, stuff that you can touch and knock on, and thoughts, which to me seem like, well, those obviously aren't things. There's not quite such a distinct line. Like, I've had these experiences of like, whoa, like reality gets wobbly, you know, in deep metaphysical states of experience, reality gets wobbly. Yeah. And in that, it becomes more clear that actually stuff, materiality, and thoughts are a part of a continuum. And all that continuum, we only experience a certain bandwidth of energy. Yeah. There's all this much, much greater bandwidth of energy. And all that energy really is the mind of God and the thinking, the process of thinking of the one infinite creator. And so from that point of view, I would say, yes, like time is very much a mental construct, as is everything. Everything is a mental construct. And then I think what happens is as we become more aware of that, and as we become more sort of like embodied in that awareness, we're the thinker. And then it gets really exciting. Then that's where like you get like spiritual powers and cities, and you get like, and I'm not saying those are exciting for themselves, but there have been these, you know, these great sages and mystics who've come to the world and have come to that realization and have been able to like manifest these, what we would say, miraculous, abilities. But really all that's going on there is that they've kind of like connected with the reality that they are the thinker. And they've kind of like directly engaged in the mental, you know, the mental construct. And from that point, I think that's how we get into these states of being able to manipulate time, moving forward and backward in time, is becoming one with that mental, you know, presence that really is more true. It's kind of a deeper truth that's a little bit invisible to us at this point.
Yeah. I think a couple things stand out for me about that is, one is just the relative nature of time. You know, how long is 5 seconds, right? If someone's like, you know, I don't know, stabbing you in the stomach, 5 seconds is like a really long time, you know. But if you're just, you know, waiting in line, 5 seconds is also a long time. But if you're just walking down the street, 5 seconds, so it's like 5 seconds can be really long, really short, depending on the nature of things. So, and then I remember hearing about, there was like a scientist talking about the outer space. And he said, as the planets move, which totally makes sense, you can't tell if, think the way he said it was you don't know if something's the idea of something evolving or de-evolving outer space is actually itself a mental construct, right? He said all you really see is things moving. Like you don't really know if I know what he said. He said you can't tell if time's going forward or backward. That's what he said. Time going forward or backward is a mental construct. All you can really see is just things moving, which actually makes total sense. Like in our minds, we decide like this is things are going this direction, so time is going this way. You know, but if things are going that direction, things will be going that way or backwards, or so it's just really, time is an amazing thing. And the other thing I wanted to bring up to you, do you know who David Blaine is?
Oh yeah.
I get in this thing, Annie knows, when I just get like fascinated by somebody, I'll be up at 2 a.m. watching YouTube videos on them, and I think this guy is like a modern yogi with like CDs, as you call them, you know? Like he's exploring, not that that's all he is, I think there's some other components too, but he's really exploring the edges of what's possible. And it's just, I think it's fascinating how people who aren't necessarily considered spiritual, when you delve deeper, they totally have the same, they're reading the same books, exploring the same things, and expressing it in different ways.
Actually gone through that same rabbit hole. Another one is Dynamo. You watched Dynamo?
No.
He's a contemporary to David Blaine.
I'll check him out.
He's a little younger. I find him actually even more like of a, anyway, not to compare, but Dynamo is like, what's going on with that guy? Like, yeah. And I've just had these questions of just like, either this person has like harnessed some spiritual powers or some like deeper, source of being able to manipulate creation, or the whole thing is just staged. The whole thing, like, they're presenting it as though it's street magic. And they're going out to these strangers in the street and doing these tricks. So the only way for it not to be that he's tapped into some greater power is if the whole thing is just staged. It's like one or the other. I don't see any other possibility.
Yeah, the documentary I was watching on David Blaine, he actually is showing in some cases like how he's working really hard to do these things for real. Some of the different things he's doing that, it's like he'll find this thing of like, oh, this isn't possible? Well, let me see if it is possible, right? And I just find that that's inspiring because we can take that to any other part of our lives and expand and realize that we have infinite potentiality and infinite possibility.
A comment from Robin. She says, I love being in a group where you don't feel that someone has the answer, where there is just more tossing around and taking what you like. Yeah.
Awesome.
I resonate with that. Just shy on an hour here.
Yeah. That's the signal that Annie's giving for an hour. So, anything else you want to share? I always really enjoy sharing time and talking with you, and it's beautiful to share it with people. Anything else that's alive for you in this moment?
It's been enjoyable. It's been a nice conversation. I feel like it's surprising an hour, right? It's relativity of time. Kind of did fly by.
Yeah.
But it's been nice.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always enjoy it. Thank you all for being here. Keep the conversation going in the thread. See you in the next now.